All right, everyone. Hello and welcome to today's webinar. We're going to get started. My name is Sarah Henry and I'm the Content Marketing Manager at Elevation Web. And we are a full-service web design agency that's dedicated to empowering nonprofits with the tech solutions they need to make a greater impact in our increasingly tech-dominated world. So our webinar series are designed to provide solutions to nonprofits like yourselves. A few housekeeping items before we get started. This webinar is going to be recorded, so don't fret if you have to step away for a moment or you get called into a meeting. We'll be sending out a link to the recording tomorrow. The slides are also available for download. If you check out the chat, you can head over to the link and URL and download the slides there. And lastly, if you have any questions whatsoever throughout the webinar, please feel free to throw them into the chat box. We'll be diving into all of the questions at the end of the presentation, and we would love to hear from you guys. So without further ado, I am so excited to announce our presenter for today. Sonia Khosla from Wild Apricot has prepared a really wonderful presentation for you all, and very excited to have her share it with you. So let's get started.
All right. Hello, everyone. And thank you, Sarah, for that introduction. So welcome to the webinar today. As Sarah mentioned, my name is Sonia Khosla, and I'm the Marketing Programs Manager at Wild Apricot by Personify. Wild Apricot, just to give you a background, is a membership management software for small to mid-size nonprofits in the association membership organization space. And my goal is to bring engaging educational content to our audience. So I am the host of our webinar and soon upcoming podcast channel. So I love to use the channel to bring free, accessible content to our audience and give them value to help them grow and, grow their membership and grow their organization. So when I create a webinar, I'm always passionate about the topic that I'm doing, but as well as the speaker that I work with. So it's always exciting to be engaging with an audience like I am with you all today. So thank you all for attending, and I encourage you to put all your questions in the chat and we'll get to those after the presentation. All right, so let's get started. Today, we are going to be talking about how to increase online event registration by 200% with an easy formula. So to start off, I'm going to review a couple of the types of events you can host, whether it's an online event or even an in-person event. So the types of events that I work with specifically are webinars, podcasts, few fundraisers, Facebook Lives, in-person events, and then I've also got other events such as payments and renewal dates, things like updating your contact information. These can all be types of events that you would need to send out reminders to bring their attention to. So let's take a quick poll here. And I want to know, what types of online events do you run? Webinars, podcasts, fundraisers, Facebook Lives, or other. And other can be in-person events, and then feel free to write in the chat what kind of in-person events you run. And then as well as other things like renewals and payments, or even if you're sending out reminders to your audience to check out like a new post that you've made or something like that. So get your answers in quick there, and then we will move on. Okay, so I see quite a few of you are putting in your answers there, and let's see the results. Okay, so quite a few people are working with fundraisers, quite a few of you even do webinars, and lots of others. Okay, so I'm going to say this again and throughout the presentation, but even though it is online events, you can definitely use this reminder framework to apply to a lot of different types of events, including in-person events. All right, awesome. So I run about, let's say for my example, 10 webinars and I get attendees from around the world. I get an average of, let's say, 800 attendees for our monthly thought leadership webinars. And I get about 100 registrants every week for our product webinars. So they're different types of webinars and they're on different dates, but the framework of sending email invites is the same. So what's the best way to get someone to attend your event? In the past, cold calling was very effective. I remember I would send out flyers or just good old word of mouth, but as well as even text messages. All these can be great way to generate leads, and they may be effective to get people to attend your event. But actually, our research and trial and error has shown that sending email reminders is the best way to increase your event registration. So because we host webinars every week and every month, I've tested out dozens of email reminder templates and different ways of getting to maximize registrations. So what I'm going to share with you today is the best strategy that we have found has worked for us and was able to increase our event registration by over 200%. So today's webinar, we're going to cover, number one, how to send reminders to your audience and when to send them. Number two is going to go through an example of our top converting reminder. And number three is an easy to use template to start writing your own event reminders right away, which is a link that you can download the template. So now, while we use this strategy to maximize online event registrations, like I said, with webinars, you can definitely apply this formula to many other situations. And that can be in-person event reminders, renewal reminders, payment reminders, reminders for members to update their contact info or check out your new blog post, downloadable asset. There's a lot you can apply this formula to. So let's take another quick poll on how often do you run online events? Do you run them on a weekly basis like me, on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, or annual? So I'll give you a few seconds there to get your answers in. All right, and let's see the results. Okay, so good majority of you are running them quarterly, few people doing weekly, and also a lot of people doing monthly, and of course annually. So that's great. Quarterly and annually, that gives you a lot more lead time, and monthly is just right up there as well. So that's great. Okay, so like I said, I host about 10 webinars per month. So, and if you're not familiar with our webinars, we try to recruit people in the nonprofit space that are experts in sharing their strategies on how to run a membership-based organization more effectively. So we always want people coming out. We want to let them know about the great free educational content that we're going to be hosting. So it's always important with 10 webinars a month that we're going to be sending a lot of email reminders. So we promote our webinars to all of our email subscribers. So over the years, as you can imagine, we've collected a lot of emails, and those are all basically subscribers that we send out notifications to, that we send out updates to, and they're always then staying in the loop on any new content that we are promoting or events that we are hosting. And one of our main goals, which is probably a mutual goal for all of us, that when you run events, you want to maximize the number of your registrants. So to do that, of course, you do need to send a lot of email reminders. And as I mentioned, for us, we discovered that this formula may not be perfect, and there always can be room for improvement, but it does work really, really well for us. So well that I've always been able to pretty much hit my target goal for registrants each month, regardless of the topic or the speaker that we bring in, because I can always rely on a consistent amount of registrations due to this easy email formula. So things like topic and speaker can always, fluctuate and differ in registration, but it is pretty reliable when it comes to the emails and the average number of registrations that I can expect to see. So from this, I'm going to share with you the results that we've found after lots of trial and error, lots of playing around with it. And basically, the results I can break down into three main parts. So the first is, how many emails should we be sending? The second is, when should we send them? And the third is, what should each email contain? So the following slides are going to break down numbers 1, 2, and 3 in a little more detail. So the first one here, how many emails should we be sending in order to maximize your attendance? So I've got a chart here basically summarizing the registration averages based on how many email reminders we sent to our list. So with one email reminder, we got about 256 average registrants. Second email reminder was 474 registrants. Third email reminder, we climbed to 807. And on the fourth, there was 798. So of course, there is a bit of fluctuation, but then when you look on the column on the far right, percentage increase over one email reminder peaks, it pretty much steadily increases from the second to the third and the third to the fourth. However, you will notice that the third and the fourth, there isn't that much of a significant increase when we're sending 3 reminders as opposed to 4 reminders. So does this matter? And then should you send 3 or 4 emails? Well, because it wasn't that much of a significance from 15% to 12, I'd say that less is more, and it's better to go with sending that happy medium of 3 reminder emails. So, and the reason being is that because there isn't a significant increase in the registrants, we'd actually notice that it's better to save that 4th email for something else, to give people a different initiative to sign up for, or let them know of a different event that we have coming up. So it's better to send 3 emails and be concise and, remind people who may be on the fence or haven't decided. That's a good way to kind of space it out. And plus, they say good things come in threes. So I think this formula rings true to that. And it's also good to note that is going to have a little bit more detail than the rest of the following emails, because again, because they are reminder emails, you want to just hit everyone with the main points of signing up and the dates and the times. So the first email, I'd say it's okay. There's more room to be more descriptive and letting everybody know the details of the speaker, their history, their background, their expertise, things like that. And then as you climb up to that third email, you want to make sure you're having lots of calls to action and making sure that they know exactly the date, the time, and when to register. So we'll break down that more, but this is just an illustration to show that the top promotional channel is still email at 57%. Meanwhile, things like newsletters, blogs, and social promotion is also definitely effective and can really help putting the word out and engaging your audience. But the best way to do that, especially if you have a huge list, and even if you don't have a big email list, email is still the best way to get people to open your content and likely to register and maximize that attendance. So here, we're going to look at number 2 is, when do I send email reminders to maximize that attendance? So this is another chart here, and I've tested out sending reminders anywhere from 1 hour before the event starts to 11 days out before the event. And we've tested out all these different days of the week and different times, but as you can see here, the first email being sent 2 days to 11 days before the event had the average registrants total of percentage of total registrants was 42. Then the second email that was sent on the day before the event, we had percentage of total registrants signing up was 29%. And then the third email was again 29%, because pretty much before the day of the event and the day of the event, people are already going to be able to figure out if they're going to be able to attend or not. But also with something like in a webinar or an online event, it's important to just remember that there's more flexibility for people to switch around things in their calendar, especially if it's, like a 1 hour commitment, or the fact that it's just online and that they don't have to travel in person. So of course, if it is something that is an in-person event, then you do want to plan out further ahead in your communications calendar and then scheduling it backwards. So let's just say, I have 100 people that are going to register for my webinar. I can expect that 42 people will sign up a week before, 29 will sign up the day before, and maybe 29 will sign up the day of. So, like I said, the sweet spot would be 2 days to 11 days before the event, and then the day before the event is a great way to also get lots of people coming in. So based on our analysis here, we know that there isn't too much of a difference in sending the first email 2 days to 11 days before the event. But because, like I mentioned, with webinars and they're occurring online, there's more flexibility to switch up your schedule. And because we also promise a free recording of the webinar, it gives them the opportunity that if they miss it, as long as they're signed up, then they can always watch it later. And you can do that in other ways. If your event isn't a webinar, you can always offer them like a downloadable asset or a handout or a summary or a link to the slide, something like that. So that way you're still getting their email, you're still getting them to register, and you're providing them with some value, even if they can't attend. So another interesting thing that we found is that sending emails, which you may not be surprised, sending emails at 4 p.m. is probably not the best idea, just because, we're all maybe busy and heading home from work. So you're less likely to be going through opening your emails at that time, as opposed to sending them between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. It's more likely that just studies have proven that if you are sending emails, it's better to send them in the morning because they'd be most likely to be opened. And then as well as sending them on days earlier in the week, like Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday are the most effective to increase event registration. And of course, avoiding sending emails on the weekend is also best practices as well, to just make sure you're really leveraging your registration and your email base and maximizing every single email that you send out. So based on this is just a summary. Here we've got the first email the week before, the second email the day before, and the third email the day of. So the third point is to consider, what should each email contain? Well, the main thing is that when someone receives an email and you look at it on your phone, or even if you just open your app in your inbox or on your desktop, the first thing you're going to see that's going to draw your attention is the subject line. So subject lines really do matter most. The subject line is going to, before even determining the content of your email, it's really going to make or break whether someone wants to even open it in the first place, right? So from our tests, one major thing that we noticed makes a big difference before even getting into the content of the email message is to indicate the time. When is this event happening? To create a little bit of like an urgency. So we have like next, and then Monday, or on tomorrow, or today. So you would have something that's like next Thursday, free expert webinar. On tomorrow, free expert webinar, or free expert webinar in 10 minutes, something like that, to create the urgency that a lot of people are then going to be like, oh, well, at least if I don't get to attend, I can still get some of the value and the takeaways from the event. So that is why the subject line is really, really key. And having that time of the event, and that, if it's free or if it's a webinar, that's also important to include in your subject line. The next thing, so again, okay, two things to remember: time of event and type of event. And then um, the creating the urgency. So FOMO stands for fear of missing out. So by putting something like on tomorrow, on today, save your seat, spots are filling up, this is what we have found is really effective to getting registrants coming through the day before or the day of or an hour before your webinar starts, because you kind of then get that fear of missing out of, oh no, this sounds like a great topic. Maybe I would benefit from it. Maybe this is content I want to hear. So it encourages people just to sign up anyways, even if they may not attend or, there's a schedule conflict. At least they signed up and at least you get their email, right? So that's great to create that sense of urgency within your subject line. Then this is just a decision tree here that I've made to basically show ultimately if someone wants to sign up, they need vital information before they can make that decision. So reading your email subject line, free webinar, the first thing that's going to come to mind is, do I want to attend a webinar? Well, if it's yes, then they're likely to open the email. And then the first thing they're going to think about is, am I interested in the topic? So for something like if you're not interested in the topic, well, then it's a no, and you can't spend your time then trying to change that. But what you can invest time in is then thinking about the people that are interested or are on the fence or considering or have an open weekend or an open afternoon. They're going to think, does the time work for me? Right? So if the time does work for them, then that's great. Then they can attend, whether it's live or they can get the recording or they can get the downloadable assets, whatever. As long as you're making sure that they know that that's also available, they're going to be likely to sign up anyways. And then of course, if the time doesn't work for them, well, the alternative is that they're still going to be provided with some value and some asset. If they sign up, you can still get their email, and then in return, they're still receiving some content, right? So that's also very important when thinking about subject lines. Then the next thing is structuring the body of the email reminder. So as for the actual message, we've also found out what kind of works best, what's visually appealing, and then as well as the copywriting of the email, what works. So we've tested out a few things to learn how to maximize click-through rates within the email. What are people clicking on, and what brings that attraction to reading through the whole email top to bottom. So a few things here that are physically appealing are like things like buttons and links in bold or in a different color, the copy, of course, and the length of the email. And then a few other things to consider are things like having white space between the text, images. It doesn't have to be too many, just maybe a few. You don't want to be too distracting. And then as well as things to consider, like if it's an in-person event or an online event, you want to know getting there. How are they going to get there? So there's even things that you can include to make that even more easier, like embedding a link to the map or embedding other, directions or taking to other apps that just make it easier to figure out how they're going to get there. And including that all in the email makes it a lot more likely that people are going to register if they don't have to go to any other source to figure things out. And then, of course, like I mentioned, if you cannot make it, what are the options? Why is someone still going to register for your event, even if they can't make it? Well, because they're still going to get value from it. They're still going to get some sort of takeaway. So those are always key things to remember in the body of the email. Because of course, we discovered throughout doing all of this that people don't read, right? So we get a lot of emails and sometimes you're just looking for the main points, and it's literally maybe a decision that you make in 2 minutes. So you're not going to be reading through the whole thing. So you want to have the key points and the basic information available right away. So those are things like the topic, what's the title, what they're going to learn. So some key takeaways or tips or solutions that they're going to be able to get from it, the time, of course, and the date. And then this is, again, things to consider, like adding a personal touch, making sure, you personalize the email, address it with the person's name as opposed to saying hello there or to whom it may concern. It's always nice to have their name there, and then even having something like, we look forward to having you, hope you can make it. So you make them feel, it's valued, their presence is valued, their engagement is valued, and we want them to come. So that's also very nice to have a personal touch throughout the email. And the personal touch can even come in ways of adding a point of contact. So mentioning, if somebody has questions or concerns, it's always great to provide like an inquiry email or a form that they can fill out or something like that, so that you can really then show them that, you welcome their feedback, you welcome their questions, and somebody's going to get back to you. Other things are like call to actions. So having different call to actions to check out the recent blog posts that you put up on this topic, or looking at, different websites or pages that can help them really figure out what the speaker or the presenter or the event is going to be like. Having a FAQs link is also very helpful, because a lot of the time there are questions that people don't want to sit and fill out a form for. So having a link to like the FAQs within the body of the email is also just a personal touch of your trying to make it easier for the reader to figure out everything they need to know within this one email, and having all the links accessible right within the body of your email. And that goes the same for like social media share links. Like if they can just, send it to their friend or post it on Twitter, post it on Facebook with the click of a button, it's really likely that you're going to get more engagement and people are going to check out what your event is. And then lastly, again, having like that personal touch of an email signature and even a PS at the end is just nice to have, because it gives them a sense of humanity. They know that they're speaking to a person and it's not not a robot. So it does add a bit of a nice personal touch for someone to read your email and to see who they're going to be engaging with. And then we've also got some nice to haves, like, do you host events that are for international audiences? Because if you do, then it's always nice to have the time zone. People don't want to sit and figure out and calculate, oh, this is in Eastern time, but I'm in Pacific. And it's easier if it's just listed right there in brackets. That makes it much easier for them. And then as well as you can provide like a link to your calendar. So you can easily click on the time zone, or you can click on the date, and it's going to immediately link it in your calendar. And then it also actually double works for you, because then you're going to get calendar reminders and calendar invites reminding them to check out your event or register, right? So again, those are just nice to have right within your email, so that people don't have to navigate too much around outside of the body of the email. And then lastly, of course, like having the program agenda URL in the email is so helpful, because it gives them an idea of the other type of content that they can take a look at. And, in case that they maybe don't sign up, can lead them to signing up to something else, right? So that's always really helpful to have. Now, the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to break down an actual example of our monthly expert webinar emails that I send out, where I use this exact formula of sending 3 emails out, 3 weeks out, and then a day before, and then the day of. So a couple things to note here. The first one is there's a logo. It's always great to have your organization logo front and center or at the top. So, you're building brand awareness, you're letting everyone know where this organized event is coming from, and also just having it more personalized as well. It adds to that aspect of keeping the template professional. Then the next thing I've got here is like how we talked about the personal touch of addressing someone by their name as opposed to just saying hello there. It's always great to have it addressed to you, because you see your name and then you're like, oh, well, let me read on. this might be important. So there you go. So creating that personal touch with a greeting is also really good. And then we use a hook within the first line of our email template. So the hook is really just to be captivating and engaging and getting them to think, like, what if that does apply to me? Or what if I am experiencing this pain point? It's helpful to grab the attention to let them continue reading on. And as I mentioned, this would be the first email that we send out. So that's why it does look a little bit descriptive and wordy, because as I mentioned, that it's better to be descriptive in the first email, and then you can kind of knock off some of the text later on once you're just reminding people. But the first email is important to have the hook and have that description just to get their decision-making process going on the value that they're going to gain from this event. And then not too far down, you want to have a link to register or a call to action immediately. And you want that to stand out. So I've used bolded text and a different color, contrasting color, and also trying to put it right away in the upper part of the email body here. So you, because it's screaming to you in green font and it's bolded, so you're likely to then at least click on the registration, to even if you don't get to reading more of the email, right? And then following that is easy to read bullet points. So let's say you're not reading through all the text, you missed the bold link call to points are pretty great because they're easy to read and it's going to tell you very quickly the value you're going to get from attending. So immediately you're going to figure out if it's worth your time or not. And within that, it's great to just lead you down following in the email to things like the register CTA. So the button is, we have found the button to be extremely, extremely useful. The button, because it's bright, it's red, it's captivating, it's, even if you're not reading the rest of the text, you're going to want to click on that big, bright orange button, right? So that's very helpful if you can use buttons, and then linking the button out to your registration page is very easy. And then we've got the date and time. And as you can see, date and time, I bolded the titles. And then I also included the 2 different time zones that we are most likely to get. So that way people don't have to do any calculations. They know both time zones that it's available in. And then last but not least is the aspect of on demand. So the on demand lets them know that even if they can't make it, it's still worthwhile to sign up because you're going to get a recording of the webinar. And recording of the webinar is also bolded and linked strategically. So you think you got this, oh, maybe I can just access the recording right now, or I can take a look at it right now, which you can always do. You can always navigate them to a different page on your website. But in this case, that link will lead out to our landing page, which again gives them the call to action to register. So this is the structure that I use for all of my reminder emails that I send out 3 times. So as mentioned, it's going to be 3 emails, 1 week, 1 day, and then the day of. And so that is basically the most effective way we have been able to see for everyone to stay engaged and for them to register, and to bring people who may be sitting on the fence of whether they can attend or not, to draw them in to just sign up anyways, because even if they can't attend, they'll still receive some sort of asset at the end. So as then what you can do is apply this strategy to any online reminder or even any event that you need to sign up. Like I mentioned, like a new blog post or a fundraiser or a Facebook Live or a new episode, or updating your contact information. There's so many ways that you can apply this because it is really applicable to anything that you need to remind people for, that you need to let them know. If you're updating your privacy policy or something like that, you can really follow this 3-step formula to make sure that people are going to read your information, and you're going to maximize your registration, or you're going to get more views to your website, or more downloadable assets, or just even in general, you're always going to be expanding your email base by doing this, because you're going to be collecting more and more emails each time. And that way you build your subscriber list. So when you go on to want to sending emails in the future for events, you've racked up quite a big database, right? So as I mentioned, you are going to be able to download, or if you can click on these links here to download and check out our guide, which we included a template with some examples. So you can download that here. And then as well as I mentioned that there's so many types of online events, and even if they're not online events, just events in general, that you can apply this strategy to. So once you have that going and seeing what works for you, you can actually start analyzing your own email campaigns through analytics and metrics, and then looking at how to optimize them for your unique members and for your unique audience. So check that out, check out the guide. And I know we've been taking questions throughout, so definitely feel free to email me or contact me through LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to chat. And then I think we're also going to take some questions now.
Hi, yes. So we have a few questions that were put out throughout the presentation. So we'll start with this question from Jason, I believe. Does the 3 email formula include the first email with the full event info, or is the initial event email plus 3 reminder emails for a total of 4?
Right, good question. So actually it is only 3. So that first email is still a reminder in the sense that you're letting people know what the event is, but you're using the same format of just as many buttons and just as many links and just as many call to actions, and letting them know the urgency. But putting all that in the first email is good, and keeping it concise. And then having those reminder emails with just as much of the same template and the same info, but maybe just a little bit less text, and then creating more of an urgency with things like the dates and it's on tomorrow, or save your seat, or spots are limited, things like that. So it just feels like it's more of another reminder.
Awesome. Right. And then we have a question from similar from 2 people. We have Tess and Jean, I'm going to assume your name is. So regarding the time frame, would you just adjust the time frame for sending emails for a gala or annual in-person event? How do you recommend adjusting that?
Yeah, sure. So with that, in a way, it's actually better because you have a lot more lead time, right? So let's say you start planning at the beginning of the year. Your emails are also going to take shape throughout as time goes on, and depending on how evolved your event becomes, because you're going to be letting them know about, for example, like a keynote speaker, or a special event, or like a networking or a social event or a cocktail hour. So you can actually have emails about those things, but that are just like letting them know about different elements of the event, but structuring it in the same way that you're encouraging people to still navigate to your landing page to register. So I would say to adjust it for in-person events that are like annual or quarterly, you can really look at your communications calendar and think about sending even, 2 emails a week or 1 email a week, where you're just reminding them of different parts of the event or the gala, like when you release your keynote, or when you release that there's a silent auction, or that there's a social event or a social networking or something like that, and just tailoring it to adding like more pieces and adding on. And as you go on, then you're increasing the value of why they would want to attend. So yeah, I think it's definitely possible to adjust it to being like 1 or 2 emails a week, even when you have like a event that is annual or far out.
Awesome. Great. And then we have one more question that it says, if you're running so many events that are maybe like weekly, and when you're having 3 emails for each of those events, that can sometimes be a lot of different emails going into the inbox if it's a weekly event. How do you kind of suggest adjusting the amount of emails depending on how rapid you're having these events?
Yes, for sure. And so, like I mentioned, we do weekly events as well, and then monthly events, and then sometimes I've got quarterly, and then sometimes I've got annual. So, your communications calendar is really key because a lot of it is actually just the organizational aspect where you want to be able to lay out when you want your emails to go out, and then looking at the audiences that you're emailing it out to. So, you can also divide it up by your audience. Some of our webinars are addressed to like paid customers or people that are, you can address it to only volunteers, or you can think about addressing it to all of your email subscribers. And then also by doing that, it kind of gives you more flexibility of how many emails you're sending out. If you are reaching out to the same audience each time, I think the rule of thumb is still not to go overboard, and to still only send out like 3 a week, because you want to give maybe a day in between is always a good rule of thumb that they say to do. So if you send something on Monday, then you send something Wednesday, and then you can send something Friday. And that's just to at least give you more space, right? But I think it's definitely important to map that out on a communications calendar so you can really see where you can move around some emails.
Awesome. That was a great answer. And then we have another question. Is it possible to send an in-person event announcement too early? What do you think about that?
I think it is possible to send it out too early, but you want to make sure that if you are going to send it out, like let's say a couple of months before, you want to make sure that maybe that there's, like, it depends on a lot of factors, right? If your event involves travel to the other side of the world or to another state that your audience, there's not a lot of them in that home base, then yeah, you do need to consider travel time and like prices, things like that. If you're offering like an early bird registration for an event that's in person and a long way out, then that's okay to send it out quite a bit early, right? Because they're still getting a benefit from that. Like, I'd say when thinking about sending something out too far in advance, maybe if you're not, releasing anything about the agenda or the speakers or the program, then yeah, then it can get a bit too early because there's no really incentive to attend. So you kind of want to make sure that you have figured out some of the logistical things before starting to outreach and send reminders. So having your agenda live and your agenda up and running, or having your early bird prices organized, or if it's like a hotel, having those things all finalized before you start to invite people to it. Yeah.
Awesome. If anyone has any last questions, throw them in right now. Otherwise, I want to say a huge thank you to Sonia for joining us today.
Thank you so
it was
much
an absolute pleasure. Lovely. And thank you guys all so much for joining on to the webinar. I hope you learned something valuable. We'll be sending out the links that she mentioned throughout the presentation to all of you guys tomorrow, so that along with the presentation recording and slides. So feel free to check those out tomorrow. But a huge thank you to all of you for being here with us today, and keep an eye out for future presentations from us at Elevation.